Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. The show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today's episode takes us straight into the heart of history, a moment most Americans have never even heard of, and one we came this close to never recovering from. I learned a ton. You will love this show. Rebels at the Gates is the title of Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson's thrilling new book. I mean, it is excellent. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up. Please check out our show notes today for more details and information about Smithsonian Associates. But we have Dr. Robert Watson today, and he tells the story of the final year of the Civil War when the Confederates launched a last, desperate, and nearly successful attempt to capture Washington, D.C., and quite possibly win the war on their terms. Imagine it. Lincoln is in the White House. Ulysses S. Grant is laying siege to Petersburg. Washington's defenses are stripped bare, and Confederate troops, starving, shoeless, but emboldened, are just 5 miles from the Capitol Dome. This isn't fiction. This is real. And in July 1864, it nearly ended the American experiment. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson, historian, professor, author of more than 40 books, and passionate storyteller, joins us today to bring this forgotten crisis vividly to life, from President Lincoln refusing to leave the Capitol to the crusty, hard-charging Confederate General Jubal Early. You're going to love this character. To the moment alcohol may have accidentally saved the United States. This story has everything. We'll talk about bold military gambits, political peril, and what it really means to lead in times of chaos, applicable to this day. So stay with us. This is history that matters, and it's never been more relevant. Here now is my conversation with Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson. Dr. Robert Watson, welcome to the program.
Good to be here, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I am looking forward to this subject. We're going to talk about your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation. We're going to talk about your new book, Rebels at the Gates. This is just going to be a fascinating topic. I know our audience is going to just want to hear more from you. We've got 30 minutes, and then you're going to be appearing at Smithsonian Associates. We'll have links so that our audience can find out more information about your upcoming presentation, your new book, all your great work. But first and foremost, welcome to the program. I hope you're having a great day, Dr. Watson.
I am, and thank you for what you do. I appreciate your work. And the Smithsonian, what an international treasure. As an historian, as an American, as someone who's inquisitive, the entire Smithsonian complex is an international treasure. I don't know that I'm happier than when I'm walking through the Smithsonian's. So the chance to work on a somewhat regular basis with the Smithsonian Associates is a real joy.
Well, thank you for that. Absolutely. Right back at you, just ditto on all of that. The Smithsonian is such a great organization, and our audience just loves you and all that you're doing. This new book, Rebels at the Gate, is exciting. But why don't we start? Tell us a little bit, just briefly, what you're going to tell us when you're at Smithsonian and how you'll use Zoom to kind of engage us, because Zoom is, we're all on Zoom these days.
Yeah. I remember when COVID first hit, and as a professor, I'm in front of students. I'm always doing town halls and lecturing for whether it's a corporate group or a charity or a fundraiser or a battlefield or whatever it is. All of a sudden COVID hits and our world changed, right? And I heard of this crazy thing called Zoom, which sounds like one of the little pull-out bubble windows from a Batman and Robin. So Zoom,
Right. Right.
kapow. I'm like, what is Zoom? And I went on, and I just thought it was the worst thing in the world for about a week, and then I thought it was the best thing in the world,
Yeah.
because it kept us all connected. That idea of social distancing, I thought was a terrible term. We should have called it physical distancing, because socially we all needed one another more than ever. And, having lost a lot of good friends during COVID, having attended funerals virtually, knowing folks that missed graduations, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, you name it, Zoom allowed us to at least be there and to share those occasions. And during COVID, I guess I agreed to do a couple of these programs free of charge for very small museums, very small historical sites, because they were going under. If you don't have the people paying to come to your program, if no big donor wants to donate, if there's not a party associated with it, these small museums, small historic sites were all struggling. So they turned a lemon into lemonade, and I would do regular programs for them. And all of a sudden, they had people from states and other countries, and they expanded their circle, and it kept not only kept them afloat, but they probably now are enjoying the fruits of reaching more people. So these days,
True.
I'm a big fan of Zoom.
Yeah, it really it does open that audience, kind of spigot, and in so doing, it really gives everybody a chance to get to know you and your work. And again, this book, congratulations on it, Rebels at the Gates, just fantastic. It's getting great reviews online. Again, we will have links so that our audience will know more about it. I believe it is. Is it out now, or is it coming
Well, we're
quickly? Just
taping
correct
this at
me.
the end of March.
Yeah.
It's due out at the end of April, so it'll be
Awesome.
due. It'll be out any day now. Advanced copies probably available online. My guess is early to mid-April. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Talking about your book is like talking about your kids,
Yeah.
or your
Yeah.
grandkids, or showing pictures of your dog or cat to everyone. So no, I'm excited about it. These books are always become my babies, and I not only I pick topics that I have a great passion for. So my work is not a chore. It's not work. It's fun. I also love to pick topics that I think topics that history has forgotten or
Mhm.
missed. What's the
Mhm.
story behind the story? What do we get wrong about history? And what's so wonderful, and this from what you're doing for your second career now, is there's still more we don't know than we do know about
Mhm.
history, including some whoppers. I mean, I love
Yeah.
these. I used to always collect and put on my office door. Every year there would be, let's say, a yard sale in Butte, Montana, and someone stopped by and bought a frame for $5. They yanked the picture out, and behind it, a Van Gogh falls out,
You're right. Right.
or a letter from Benjamin Franklin or something, or every year there's a story. Someone's grandma passed. They go to her house, and in the closet are some letters, and there's a letter from Lincoln or something. So there's always these wonderful things that we don't know history has missed. So what I like to do is I try to pick number one, stories I like. Number two, stories that aren't well known. And three, I try to write them in a way to reach a general audience. I guess one of the critiques with professors is we write for five other professors that share our research interest, and six of us sit around and argue. So I always try to write for a wide audience, people that just have an interest in history, or maybe don't know that they have such an interest in history.
Well, I have a feeling, Dr. Watson, that this book is going to be a home run. Interesting to so many, and you give it this injection of very purposeful high drama right at the very start. We meet the Confederate general, and I want to make sure and get this name right too. I think Jubal Early. Am I pronouncing Jubal's first name? Jubal Early.
Jubal Anderson Early, yeah.
Tell us
And what
about
a
him,
character.
and just please, don't mean to interrupt. You go.
No, no, please. Yes. So, you know, y- I think a good book, even a history book, just like a good movie or an opera or a novel, it's character driven. If you give me a compelling character, everything else falls into place. And you couldn't pick a more compelling bad guy. Jubal
Right.
Anderson early, he even looked like Yosemite Sam. Um, he is a cantankerous, disagreeable, crusty, foul-mouthed, stooped over, even puts a feather in his hat, and he's a walking caricature. And not even fellow Confederate commanders liked him. He's known for cursing everyone out. Even a reverend that was the chaplain for the unit at one time complained about I'm lagging behind, and Early yells at him something like "real men are in the front." I mean, and then another time the chaplain complained they were marching by a cemetery, and Early marched the men so fast by it they didn't have time to pay their proper respects. And the chaplain criticized it, and Early said, "I'd draft every damn one of those those dead soldiers if I could." He just complained and grumbled, and if you got too close to him, you were covered with tobacco juice because it spewed and nobody could understand his accent. And anyway, so the book opens up. He is on horseback with his senior commanders, and they're outside of Washington, D.C. And there's a large field, a field of fire. The Union cut down the trees so they could see the enemy approaching the Capitol. And he's out there, and he pulls up, and I get all this from his diary. He had a diary. He wrote a book about it, and he and his officers wrote letters, so we know what they said. He's sitting there with his field glasses looking at Washington, D.C. He sees the unfinished dome of the Capitol building. And he says to them, he smiles and says, "I'm smiling not because of what I see, but because of what I don't see." He doesn't see the Union Army. DC is ripe for the taking. It's there. He's got it. And in a 10-minute gallop by his horse, he's in downtown Washington, D.C. So yeah, that's the opening. They're ready to sack Washington, burn it to the ground, maybe kill Lincoln. And this is a game changer in American history.
It's just this wonderful opening, and again, the name Jubal. How can you not just jump right into this? And so
No, it wouldn't be as good if his name was John.
right, not even close. Jubal just does it for me. And how close did we get to losing Washington? As he's looking out and just kind of grinning to himself.
Yeah.
Did it just about come to that we almost lost?
Yeah, there's a couple measures. One, we can say we were absolutely 24 hours away from losing the Capitol, losing the war, losing the United States as we know it, 24 hours out, because Early waits and he decides to hit the city the next day. And of course, the story on why he waits is even better. But we have letters from prominent journalists, from senior Union generals, senior Confederate generals, the Henry Halleck, who was the chief of staff for the Army, Stanton, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War at the time. Today we call it Defense. All of them said, had Early attacked, it would have been over. So, in other words, it's almost a unanimous agreement among senior military people that were there that Early had the city. So, on one hand, we could say we were 24 hours out. On the other hand, Lincoln visits one of the most forward forts, Fort Stevens, which is on the northwest corner of the city. It's the forward fort. That's where Early and the Confederates ride up. So this is going to be ground zero in the defense of Washington. And Lincoln, being as engaged as he always was, being rather fearless, Lincoln climbs up on the parapet and is out there, and he's asking where are the Confederates, and we need more men to defend the fort. And they're getting an army of, they called it the Invalid Corps, one-armed, one-eyed, one-legged veterans convalescing in the hospitals. They basically put them in wagons, hand them a musket, hand them 10 musket balls, and drop them off at the fort. These guys couldn't retreat if they had to. And Lincoln's up there, and a shot fires out. There was a Confederate sharpshooter, a sniper. A shot fires out, and it misses Lincoln by about a foot. Now, this is the critical junction of the last full year of the war. If Lincoln's killed at that point, I think history's different. Most historians, your Harold Holzers, all your great Lincoln and Civil War historians are in agreement that Lincoln was basically the glue, the shoestrings, and the tape that held this fragile Union together. You substitute another name for Lincoln, and it's literally a crossroads in history, Lincoln and everyone else. Moreover, November, the election's coming up, and you have some, peace candidates who would have given everything up to appease the Confederates. If Lincoln's gone, the fall November 1864 election goes a different way. In other words, there's any one of a number of scenarios. So you could say we're 24 hours and 1 foot away from losing the United States.
Wow. You've written more than 40 books, and this, unknown, battle outside of the White House, it drew me in just as much as the opening segment there, and your writing is so vivid. It almost seemed personal. What drew you to this story, and why now?
So first off, thank you, Paul. You're my new best friend.
Yeah.
So
Congratulations to you, not me.
my middle name's Paul. There we go. So
Okay.
at any rate, so when I write, um, I always remember that I'm not writing for 15 other professors. You're writing for the public. So I try to write visually. When Early and his horses pulled up, you imagine it was so dusty, so dry, and exceptionally hot. Everybody was saying, locals in Washington were saying it was the hottest, driest summer they can remember. So as the horses pull up, you can see the dust kicking up from the horses. Early and his men had been riding aggressively and hard, so their butternut and gray uniforms were covered in sweat. They were exhausted. You imagine the horses' heads hanging. You imagine them utterly exhausted, but now imbued with the excitement that they're ready to sack the city. So I try to write visually as if it's a movie. I try to visualize the scenes. It helps that I guess I'm nerdy about this. I go to the sites. So I went to Fort Stevens in Washington. I stood on the parapet, which is there today. It's very small. Nobody knows about it. I stood there next to where Lincoln was almost shot. I stood behind one of two old Civil War era cannons they still have on display for the public, and looked out at what they would have seen. If I'm writing about Harry Truman, I go to his home. I walk the street out front of 219 North Delaware. If I'm writing about the Revolution, I walk around Elfreth's Alley in Philadelphia. And then if there's a battle, like Gettysburg was the early July of 1863, you go there in early July so you can see what the foliage looked like, the humidity. We celebrate, for example, Pickett's charge as this gallant, charge. No, it wasn't. It was stupid. It was a suicide mission. The men walked up an open, exposed hill as the Union was slaughtering them. It was dumb. But if you go there and you are in the tree line and you're looking out as one of those soldiers thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to that? And the Union has picket lines and rifle pits and artillery and you're walking up an exposed incline. It's a suicide mission. So I think it's important that we need to go to these places to, as much as we can, walk in their shoes. So I try to always remember, I read the diaries. What were they thinking? What did they have for breakfast? What was the weather like? And, we watch too many video games or, I don't know, Sylvester Stallone, Schwarzenegger movies to think that, the average soldier would be peeing themselves, and who wouldn't? Everybody would. Stallone and Schwarzenegger would. You're there as artillery is exploding next to you.
Yeah, amazing.
I wrote a book a year or two ago on the British sacking Washington, D.C. in 1814, August 24th, 1814, in the War of 1812. And I followed a British soldier and an American soldier kind of through the invasion. And this British soldier was describing that when he was just outside of the city in a battle, um, um, and he described he was standing there, and there was he was a lieutenant. He was young, but a lieutenant because he was educated. There was a private beside him who was scared to death. He said a hail of like bullets and artillery were coming at them, and he said that he was trying to calm the private down. He turns around and just feels this whoosh and heat, and he's covered in liquid. He turns around and the privates from his waist down, his legs are standing there. His upper body took off with a cannonball, went right through him, and then the legs collapsed and he's covered in blood. And I'm thinking, who could possibly charge the enemy after something like that? So I think in a case of wartime, we do a disservice to the brave people that wore the uniform to turn it into some Hollywood or video game or something of that effect. So that's what I try to keep in mind when I write.
Hi, this is Paul. Before we jump back into today's show, I want to take a moment to recognize a truly special milestone, Smithsonian Associates' 60th anniversary. Since 1965, Smithsonian Associates, the largest museum-based education program in the world, has been inspiring lifelong learners with unforgettable experiences, connecting audiences with the Smithsonian's museums, research, and experts in new and exciting ways. This year, the celebration is for you, with a full year of special programming both online and in person, from behind-the-scenes looks at Smithsonian collections to conversations with astronauts, historians, filmmakers, and curators. There's something for everyone. Smithsonian Associates has created something extraordinary. I'm proud to partner with Smithsonian Associates to share their incredible programs with the Not All Better Show audience. Thanks for being part of this journey. Here's to 60 years of curiosity, learning, and discovery. Our guest today is Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson. Smithsonian Associates will be presenting Dr. Watson coming up. Please check out our show notes today for more details about Dr. Watson, his upcoming presentation, and his wonderful new book, Rebels at the Gates, The Confederacy's Final Gamble and the Battle to Save Washington. Dr. Watson, I want to talk to you for a few minutes more, if you've got some time to just share with us, because I'd like to talk about General Grant, because he was kind of the man at the moment there. He was exactly what Lincoln needed. Certainly, we remember him as relentless, perhaps even brutal. What do we learn in terms of leadership style about that man that is applicable to us today? What kind of carries forward?
Well, I'm a big Grant fan. And I think that one of the most obvious lessons is leadership can sometimes come from the most unlikely of places.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had McClellan, who looked like a general and acted like Napoleon, who's, top of his class, West Point. Then you have Hooker and Burns and Meade and Butler. You have all these Union generals, and none of them get the job done. And Lincoln would be a good corporate headhunter today. He was a talent scout. He knew who to hire. And he picks Grant because he knows Grant's the right man for the job, and people have a fit. Grant's a drunk, they claim. And, Lincoln has some quip to the extent of find out what whiskey Grant drinks and give it to all my generals. It's working. Grant is picked. Nobody thinks he can do the right job, but Grant brings overwhelming force to bear. So he designs what he calls his overland campaign. We're going to take it to Lee. Not only are we going to take it to Lee, if we beat Lee, we're not going to let him get away. We're going to follow him until every last man is done. And this army is going to come in from this direction, and this army from that direction. The North had the advantage of men, money, and manufacturing, the 3 M's. Lee couldn't fight us everywhere, Grant says. So if we have one army hitting him in this state, one army hitting there, it becomes a mathematical question. So Grant understands, at several thousand feet looking down at the battle, and he's relentless, and he's a pit bull with a bone. He's not letting that thing go. And Lee knows this, which is, the background for this whole story. Lee is trapped and his army is trapped. Jefferson Davis within the Petersburg, Richmond, this region, and Grant has it surrounded and is laying siege to it. Lee knows it's over, because if there's any other general, Lee said, we could inflict damage, inflict casualties, and they would pull back. Grant will never stop until the last one of us is done. So Grant turns out to be a good strategist, a good tactician, and he leads from the front. He was a soldier's officer. In fact, one reporter wrote that they were in camp to interview Grant, and they didn't know he was the general because he was covered in dust and he wore a simple cowboy hat. And, whereas Robert E. Lee was dressed like His Majesty King Robert V, right? Um, Grant was dressed like a regular soldier and was humble, chomping on a cigar and walking among the men. And what do we need to do? So I think that from humility to leading from the front to seeing the big picture to leadership coming from some of the most unlikely places, I think Grant, you can put a check mark in all those boxes.
Well, again, the writing, Dr. Watson, is just fantastic. It's chilling, and my hat's off to you on the research and just this prescient idea of the parallels here between, kind of these images of the Confederate troops almost reaching the Capitol, and then the January 6th rioters storming the Capitol steps. What struck you the most in this kind of great historical echo between the time that you were writing this and kind of what is kind of taking place in our country today?
Well, January 6th was one of the things that inspired me to write two books, this one and the book on the British sacking Washington in 1814, because it's not the first time Washington was in the crosshairs. It's not the first time there was an assault. And I guess what struck me the most was, in the War of 1812, the British were our brothers just a few years earlier, and now they're sacking our city. In the Civil War, the Confederates were our brothers, were our countrymen just a few years earlier, and now they're sacking the city. And in January 6th, it was people claiming to be patriots, claiming to love America, who attacked our city. And it's not their city, it's not my city, it's our city. And the Capitol building itself is the temple of liberty, man. This is the most important and most majestic building in the United States. It's a symbol for the planet of the possibilities of it. So the symbolism of it. And as I see General Early and the Confederates looking at the unfinished dome, and that's a symbol, a metaphor for the unfinished work that Lincoln was set up to doing and what the country was about. And they're going to finish all that. And again, they darn near do it. So the whole idea behind this is that Grant's got Petersburg, which is the important transportation hub, rail, road, waterway, into Richmond. He's got it surrounded. If that falls, this war is over. And Lee knows it, and Grant knows it, and Grant will not give up, and Lee knows that. So Lee hatches a desperate, it's sort of the Hail Mary pass at the end of the football game. If we don't get it, we lose. If we get it, we can win. So he gets crusty old Jubal Early, Yosemite Sam himself, and he gives him an army.
I love that.
The estimates vary between 12 and 20,000. But what makes the army formidable is it was Stonewall Jackson's old army. Stonewall Jackson, arguably the greatest general of that era, any era. And so they called them the foot cavalry because they could march so quickly. So this army sneaks out on June 13th at 2 a.m. out of the circle in Richmond and Petersburg, and they race up the Shenandoah Valley, and they're going to hit Washington, D.C., which is undefended. Why is it undefended? Because for Grant to end this war, he needs every available man, artillery, gun he can get. So he pulls them off other forts, and they've got over 100,000 men. They got thousands of cannons just selling Lee. So, but therefore, he left Washington exposed, and Early almost, that's what allows him to almost take the city.
Robert Watson, our guest, author of this wonderful new book, Rebels at the Gates. Congratulations again on this wonderful writing. It's just vivid and the research. Just a couple final questions for you real quick, Dr. Watson. As you're doing the research, anything just jump right out at you and give you goosebumps throughout this? Because it's moving throughout.
Yeah. So the Battle of Monocacy, which is in Maryland with General Lew Wallace, had Lee just rushed into Washington, he would have had it. But he's passing this important transportation crossroads in Maryland at Monocacy. And once he gets through that, he's in Washington, basically. And it's pretty much undefended. So General Lewis Wallace, who would go on after the war to write the best-selling book of the 1800s, and that's Ben-Hur. Lew Wallace rushes there, but Lew Wallace is an unlikely hero. He was basically canned and stripped of command. His reputation is mud. He's told to just manage Baltimore, but he realizes there's no army there. He has only a few men. He races there, and Early's army should have just bypassed it and hit Washington, but Early, being the cantankerous guy that he is, can't pass up a fight. So they fight at Monocacy, and Wallace's small Union army fights like beasts, demons. A long day of fighting, they inflict casualties, and by the end of the day, a couple things have happened. Early's army is too tired to rush to Washington. Now we know where they are in strength, and Wallace reports it all. And now we know they're coming. So that was a grave mistake. And then the other mistake happens right after this. Instead of racing to Washington, the Confederates bust into the Union warehouses. And they also have alcohol in them. And the Confederate Army basically spends 48 hours in a being pickled, just drinking themselves into oblivion. You have thousands of soldiers just lying on the ground, vomiting, passed out, hungover, drunk. The army is in no position to fight. So it sure is an indictment of Early and his commanders in their lack of discipline they used with their soldiers. So those two costly mistakes, in fact, the one storehouse they broke into was a naval storehouse. And after the war, an admiral and a general write back and forth, and I quote the admiral. He says, "You think it was the army that won the war? It was the Navy, because it was our alcohol that made the Confederates drunk for 48 hours, and then they couldn't attack the Capitol." So talk about, if you replay history again 10 times, Paul, 9 out of 10 times, if they don't do that, history's different. But they had to fight at Monocacy. And even when Wallace loses, they want to fire him, strip him of any command because he lost. Only later does Grant realize, oh my goodness, in losing he won because he delayed the Confederate army and inflicted massive damage. So Wallace becomes yet another wonderfully unlikely hero.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Thanks for all that you do. Congratulations for all of this. Again, Dr. Robert Watson, Smithsonian Associate, author of Rebels at the Gates, The Confederacy's Final Gamble, and The Battle to Save Washington is his new book. We'll have links so that you can find out all this great information. Please, Dr. Watson, come back and see us again. It's just been a pleasure talking to you. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you at Smithsonian Associates coming up.
Good. Be my honor to come back and keep up the good and important work, Paul.
Thanks for joining us today. My thanks to Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Robert Watson will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up. Please check out our show notes today for more information about Smithsonian Associates. My thanks to the Smithsonian team for all their help with the show. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Be well. Be safe. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on radio and podcast. Join us again next time as we deep dive into some of the most fascinating real-life stories from across the world, all focused on this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates Interview Series on community radio.